Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. You see the information on the screen, so you already know what I am about. So let's get to it. So today I am joined by the absolutely wonderful and phenomenal Abigail of Proverbs 31 University. We had so much of a good time. We just had a great time last time hanging out. I did some stuff for her channel. She did some stuff for my channel. So we were like, yo, we've got to do it again. We've got to get together. We've got to talk about, some of these things out here that people are dealing with. So one of the things I know as a guy, right, I'm always really, interested in is this whole concept of, women and as they're knocking into 30, right? Because we see around the world, not just here in the United States, but around the world, 30 seems to be this boundary, that they're always trying to encourage single women, to make sure that they're married around that time. And even recently, Kirk Franklin came out, in a clip where he was basically trying to talk about the church pressuring women and all this other kind of stuff for marriage, and is the church, weaponizing, marriage. And so this is a big thing. It's not just getting married, but it's when and what are your odds and different things like that. And if you've been hanging out on my channel for a while, you already kind of know how I feel. But it's not about me today. It's about Abigail today. So that's why we have her on, because we have a woman who is a mighty woman of God who 100% believes in marriage because she's married herself. And she is going to help us understand, okay, what's going on with women as they get closer to 30? What's going on? Should women be settling in order to get married? How can they find men? What's going on? Is it over for them if they're not married, in their early 30s? We're here to ask her those questions today. So, without further ado, I will drop that first bomb. So, should women, first of all, be extremely concerned as they start to near the age of 30?
When it comes to getting married,
When
correct?
it comes to getting married, that's all we talk about. We talk about marriage.
Should they be concerned? Yeah, I think you should. There is such thing as a biological clock, and a lot of times there are women making unfortunate decisions because of that biological clock. There's a lot of women that want to be mothers,
Mm-hmm.
and they will notice that around 30 and up, that biological clock is starting to tick. I wonder. I haven't looked at the study for this, but I wonder when the biological clock actually sets in for women. But I know it's early. It could be like mid to late 20s, early 30s. I'm not sure, but I do know that a biological clock is real. And a lot of women do feel that clock ticking, and they're like, I want to have a child. And that is nature. That is human. That is what God has put in us as men and women, is to procreate, is to, be fruitful and multiply. The problem is, though, that there are some women who are, we're talking about settling. I think you're settling if you're going to have children outside of marriage. If you're going to do anything outside of God's will, then you're settling. You're not settling for the right thing, but you're settling for the wrong thing, which is whatever the enemy wants you to do, which is usually influenced by others around you, your peers in society, media, celebrities, etc. And so, yes, I do think, women, they want to have children, and sometimes they feel like, well, I haven't found anybody, I haven't gotten married, so let me go and get this, artificial insemination, or let me have a child by myself, or let me just, get a contract with somebody and we'll just have this child. I think it matters when you're 30 because of the biological clock. And because that clock is ticking, that you're going to want children, but now you're saying, I just rather have a child out of wedlock because I haven't been able to get married. And to me, that is an excuse. I think it's all about prioritizing marriage. I think a lot of times the reason why a lot of women find themselves in that situation where their biological clock is ticking, they're 30 or up and they haven't gotten married, a lot of times because they haven't prioritized marriage. A lot of women have been taught from childhood, especially in the Black community, to prioritize career, to prioritize education, to prioritize entrepreneurship, to prioritize leveling up though without a husband and a family. Are you truly leveling up if you're not completely doing what God wants you to do? And God wants us as human beings to be fruitful and multiply. Now, I can hear someone out there saying, well, not everyone is meant to be married. But as you can see, I think I discussed that last time on your channel. I don't agree with that. I think most people are meant to be married. It's very few people that are called to singleness. Paul was called to singleness, and he said, I want all of you guys to be single because then you can focus on the ministry. But I know that you are not like me. A majority of you guys are not like me. So I'd rather you go get married. I'd rather you go get married. If that's going to keep you from stumbling, then I'd rather you get married. So yes, a majority of Earth population are meant to be married, have families, right? And so I just think, you know, I think the problem is that when you get to 30 and up, and if you're a woman that wants to be married, now that's if you want to be married. If you don't have the desire to be married, okay, whatever. But if you do want to be married, I think the issue is not prioritizing marriage. And our culture doesn't prioritize marriage. You know, one of the reasons why Black women are single, I heard a woman say this, it's like, why is it that Black women are not getting married? Why are they least likely to marry? I think it's because we don't prioritize marriage. We don't teach. We don't come up in two-parent married homes. We don't see a husband and a wife together as children. And then we see our mothers who more often than not, are single, and they've never seen a wife and a husband dynamic growing up. And then we hear our mothers say, focus on your career, focus on education, focus on everything but marriage. Then you have culture with feminism that is saying, focus so much on career and education, and not enough emphasis on marriage and family. So then when you get to be about 30 and you are a woman that's always desired marriage, but you put all these other things in front of you, then you do feel like you're settling when you decide to finally get married, or when you desire a child. You feel like, well, I have to settle if I want to get married. So ultimately, I think the problem more so is just not prioritizing marriage as Black women for a lot of us, and finding ourselves in a situation where we're 30 and up and we want to be married and we want to have children, or we want to have children, but we want to do it the right way, but yet we don't feel that there are any prospects because we didn't focus on it. So I think it's more so a thing of focus and priority.
Oh, no, that's good. That's good. So going down this whole priority concept, so what would you tell the women that are more introverted, the women that are more the volunteer type, the women that really, they're not trying to push the big careers, they're not trying to do all that. They are basically, just in situations where maybe they just don't have that many men around them, or, they're just, like I said, they're just not, like I say, necessarily going up the corporate ladder. you know, what would you tell those women that are 29, 30, 31, 32? How can they get to a place of prioritizing?
Well, that's what I would tell them, is to prioritize it. If you know at this point in your life that you want marriage and you want children and you want to do it God's way, you need to make that a priority. The Bible says that God will give us the desires of our heart. And we have not because we ask not. But now we have to understand it has to be in the will of God, of course, right? He's not going to just give us something that is not in his will. But it's definitely in his will for us to be married. It's definitely in his will for our children to grow up in stable two-parent married homes. That is his will. So first of all, let's shift our focus. We're up in age now and you desire marriage. Now it's time to prioritize it. And how I would say it, the Bible says in Proverbs 31, it says that she gets her knowledge from afar, right? There's a scripture in Proverbs 31 where it's saying, like, she goes and she does what she needs to do to get the education, to get the knowledge, to get the whatever resources from afar. One translation is the merchant ships, and she gets it from afar and she brings it home, and she does something with that knowledge. She does something. So start prioritizing it, and now start doing what you need to do to go and get that wisdom, that knowledge, and be around the men that you desire. If there's no men around you, then you need to go where the men are. If you feel like there's no men at my church, there's no, available men at the grocery store, I don't know, wherever, then go where men are that you believe would have good character, that you would believe would be interested in you. You have to go. You have to move. You have to move. If there's no jobs in a specific town, well, what are you going to do? Just stay in that town and die and not do anything? No, you're going to uproot yourself. You're going to move, and you're going to go to a town where the jobs are. It's the same thing when it comes to prioritizing marriage. You got to go to the church. You got to that prioritizes marriage. You got to go to the functions and the events that prioritize marriage. You got to listen and watch the content online or the shows or the movies that prioritize marriage. You got to go to the conferences and the events that prioritize marriage. And you've got to go where those men are. Where are men? Men are everywhere. They're they're at the gym. They're at the basketball courts. They are downtown, in Soho or whatever downtown district you're at, and they're shopping and they're working there. They're, UPS drivers all over the place. Like, you got to go where they are. And when I say go, make yourself available, I'm not saying that you have to put yourself out there in a way that's like, I'm going to be the one taking charge. I'm going to be the one that's pursuing. I'm just saying, put yourself in a place where a man can pursue you, can see you. So that is the thing for that woman that's introverted, or that woman who hasn't really prioritized her career, but she feels like she's nearing 30, she is 30 and up, and there is no marriage in sight. We got to figure out what's going on. What are the demographics in your neighborhood? And are you outside? Because there's a lot of women, and I've asked this question even on my channel. Why do you think you're not married as a woman and you want to be married? Like, what's going on? Sometimes women just want to stay in the house. There's some women that are homebodies and they want to stay in the house and they feel like that's the best. God is going to just have this man magically appear at their front door. And that's just fantasy. That is a romantic movie. That doesn't happen in real life most times. Maybe every now and then, but you're going to have to get yourself out there. If you're someone that's not, the only way that could even work is if you're doing online dating. But if you're too shy for online dating and you're not interested in that, then you're going to have to get out and go places where men are. And you're going to have to just start prioritizing and getting that mindset that you need by all the things that I said: attending events, going to conferences, asking questions, looking at content, that kind of stuff. Start prioritizing it. The way you prioritize education, the way Black women prioritize education should be the same way we prioritize getting married. A lot of Black women, there's a stat that says Black women are the most educated group in America. Well, actually, that is not true. Black women are the most enrolled group in America to an institution. And no, I looked it up. We're more likely to be enrolled. It's actually Asians that are the most educated, Asian Americans. But regardless, we're the most enrolled, meaning we prioritize education in some way because we're going and enrolling ourselves in these institutions. So if we're going to enroll ourselves in those institutions for education, we need to start prioritizing enrolling ourselves into the institution of marriage. And that can be, like I said, with the content, things that's going to make you have the mindset to get married and start prioritizing. With the content that you watch, with the events that you're attending, with the church, because not a lot of churches, and we talked about this before on your channel when it comes to the Black church, it's not a lot of churches in the Black community that prioritize marriage that much. They don't, because the dynamics is way more Black women in church than there are Black men. So that is not a church that's prioritizing marriage that much, because there would be more women in the Black church getting married. There would be more connections and marriages and families being built in the Black church, and there's not. So if you feel like you're attending a church where there's less men there, or there's barely any sermons and talks about the importance of marriage and the family dynamics and all that stuff, then you may need to go to a church that prioritizes that. You may need to find that. If that is your priority, if that is your desire, if that's what you believe God is calling you to be a wife, you have to go out, prioritize it, and make it happen. So that's what I would say. Go to where the men are. Start prioritizing it by changing your mind and getting that knowledge from afar, like the Proverbs 31 woman. And I think you will see a big, big difference. It's amazing how much our mindset can shift what we do in our real life and can start bringing in the things that we desire. That it's like, oh, I didn't see it. The perspective is different. I have to get up. I can't just sit in my house and expect a man to come.
So you talked about, a lot of women, having reasons for not being married. And I know for a lot of women, honestly, that's a sore spot. They really don't like that concept of, people saying, why are they single and why are they not married? And for me, I'll be honest, I've always believed that there are real reasons, but I don't always think that those reasons are bad. For instance, we had the pandemic 2 years ago, and so that really kind of deterred a lot of people. So if you weren't already in a relationship, or you weren't already in a situation where you just knew a lot of people that you could date, then that kind of hurt, your chances during that time. So I always think that there's could be a very real reason, but I think understanding these reasons helps people, to kind of figure out what they're doing wrong. But I do find that a lot of men may weaponize this against women, and maybe it's become a sore spot. So I like the fact that you talked about that. Now, one of the things that I've, started to really talk about more and more, out on this channel is this whole concept of a woman's romanticized fantasy of her romantic life, right? So this is basically where a woman kind of sees a man in this romantic space in her head, and she's kind of believing, okay, he should act this way, he should walk this way, he should do this, he should do that, which lines, up, to her sexual nature. So if she's used to a guy, for instance, that is a little bit more romantic in his movements, that's what she's going to be attracted to. If she's more into a guy that's more thuggish in his movements, then that's what she's going to be attracted to. And so sometimes we can miss blessings because we're lining ourselves up with the wrong energy. So with that in mind, okay, thinking about, like I say, how women see, like I'm not a woman, you're the woman. So thinking about how women would perceive a man that's coming up to them, see a man talking to them, see a man in the mall or whatever it is, or if her dad has told her, you never ever, say something to a man first. He always has to say something to you first. All of these types of things, what do you think that does to women, when we're trying to see if we can get them married in their 20s or early 30s? Do you think that that type of mindset, this romanticized mindset, could be holding them back?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's so funny because I've been interested in this topic. Recently, I have been looking into arranged marriages, and I've been looking into the history of arranged marriages. I've been looking into the history of romantic love. When we got to the point, I think it was about the 20th, I'm sorry, about the 20, was about the 19th, I think it was the 19th century. Don't quote me on this, but I do remember reading or looking into it, is that this is kind of a new concept about the whole romantic love thing. And this is why I think it's a problem, because back in the day, there was arranged marriages. People, kind of marriage was kind of almost like a business in a way. It's just like we have certain things in common. And, I think you could be good at this. I could think you could be good in that. A lot of families also were involved in the process as well. It was easier to get married, and that was how it was. But then around the 19th century, I believe it was the 19th century, we started introducing romantic love marriages. Love marriages. I love you because you do this for me, or you make me feel this way. And let me say, I don't have a problem with love marriages, or but also we need to know what the definition of love is. Okay, anytime society has a definition, that it's gonna definitely contradict what the Bible says about love. Okay, if you look at love, Jesus is the totality, fulfillment of love. It's about sacrifice. He loved us so much that he was willing to sacrifice himself for an entire human race, a whole population, a whole bunch of people. And it said that they might be saved, meaning that he knew that there would be people who would never accept his love. They would never accept what he did on the cross. But yet he still went anyway because he cared and loved us so much. So when we're talking about love in the sense of, romantic love in the culture, and what Bible's definition of love is, I think it's a problem. And since this is, you speak a lot to Christians, I think we have to not allow culture's version of love to get into what God, the biblical agape love is, or what Jesus did on the cross. It's sacrifice. Love is goodwill. You wanting the best for that person. You caring and you're sacrificing and serving for that person. So if we're looking at love in that concept, then that's great. But if we're looking at love because of feelings, because of what culture says he makes me feel this way, well, then we're also going to do what culture says, and we're going to be like what Tia Mowry is basically doing. I wasn't happy, so I had to graduate from my marriage because it wasn't about, the love died. The love wasn't there anymore. So if we're going to talk about romanticized love, we have to understand that that's a cultural thing. That's outside of the biblical context of what love is. And it's dangerous because a lot of women, we grow up watching fairy tales. We grew up watching Cinderella, Sleeping Beauty, Snow White. We want to, Princess Tiana. We want to be that princess. We want the dragon, that man to come and slay the dragon and then just to come and whisk us off into the sunset, right? But the problem is we never see what happens after the wedding in those movies. It ends right there. So you think that's all it takes to get your love, to be in love, is a man willing to do all these things to get you. But then we never see the end of those fairy tales. It always stops when they get married and it's happily ever after, and that's the end. But we know that there's no such thing as happily ever after because life is going, like you were saying before, life is going to life. Life is lifing and things are going to happen and come up. And so I do think that romanticizing, fantasizing love from a fairy tale concept, from the world's concept of what love is supposed to be, is doing and has done a disservice to women, specifically Black women. We cannot put our definition of love by what the culture of society wants. We need to have our definition of love and what God says. And love is self-serving, is sacrifice, is patient, is kind. It's all of that. The whole scripture, I think it's, was it Corinthians 13 or something?
Yeah.
It's the whole chapter of love. And it tells you what love is. That is not what the world would say love is. And so we have to be careful with adapting their version of love, because their version of love is as long as he makes you happy and as long as he's doing this for you, then he loves you. But when he stops, then you're not happy anymore, then you get a divorce and get out of it. And that means, even if that means uprooting your family, uprooting your children's lives, if that means destroying everything that you have built together because you're not happy anymore and those feelings aren't there anymore, then that's fine. And that's what culture says. So yes, romantic love, fantasizing, all of that stuff has done a disservice because we have missed out on quality men, on decent men who may not be so super romantic. And as we were talking about before on my channel, who may be a little awkward, who may not have all that game and that swag or whatever, but they can be good husbands. Okay, like a lot of women are talking about Sierra and Russell Wilson. Sierra, send me that prayer. What was the prayer that you prayed to get Russell Wilson, right? But we have to understand Sierra wasn't even looking at a Russell Wilson years ago. It took her going through all of that mess that she did with Bow Wow, 50 Cent, with Future, more recently before Russell. All of these men who were basically the same, for her to see a Russell Wilson in her 30s, right? And unfortunately, we bypass those guys all the time because they don't make us feel anything. And that's the problem. The romantic love, I'm not here for it. I'm not in favor of that being why we should get married. That should not be the totality of why we should get married. There should be some principles, some standards, some things that are simple, but that will be easy to discern than romantic love, because romantic love can be manipulation too. Like it could be some type of manipulation tactic. I'm gonna do all this stuff for you. Then when we get married, all of that is done. I'm not doing that anymore. I got you. I got what I wanted, So then now you're all like, oh, he doesn't do this for me. And what was all of that love that we had? It's just an incomplete concept, and I just don't think it works. I don't think romantic love, all of that fantasizing, I don't think it works.
I mean, you dropped so much in that. I got so into what you were saying. I was trying to write down some notes, but I got so into it because I think you dropped so many really good nuggets when it came to that. But I want to circle back, because you said a little bit about Russell, and I know that's going to lead me into some other things that I want to talk about because, Sierra and Russell Wilson, to me, are the perfect example of, honestly, of what we're dealing with in the world right now. OK Cupid, they have their famous poll or whatever that they did, research that they did based off of their website, and most men agree with it because they can feel it. Okay, and there's this concept that 80% of women are chasing 20% of men,
Mm.
right? And several other, influencers and dating coaches have talked about what they've noticed, what they've talked to and different things like that. And I understand that women want the best they can get. They're trying to find these really great people, but it's always that concept of great based off of their very limited knowledge about people, very limited knowledge about men. And so here you have Sierra, and to me, Sierra is, like I said, a perfect example. She comes in, she's a single mom, and honestly, if Sierra wasn't as pretty as she is, and if she wasn't in the circles that she's in, because she's in this mid-millionaire circle group, then we have to ask ourselves, would she even be married right now? Would she be our poster child of the better life, right? Now, I'm glad that God allowed it because it is opening so many women's eyes that these good guys that they think are boring or they think are dull or they think of whatever it is, that's the man they should have been chasing in the first doggone place. And again, when we look at the Bible, as we talked about on your channel, when you're looking at Proverbs 5 and then you look at Proverbs 7, and it talks about when it's saying that the woman, because this is about the immoral woman, is basically saying, her mouth is dripping with honey, her words are smoother than oil. So when we flip it for women, it's the same thing. His mouth was like honey, his words are dripping like oil because it works for women the same way it works for men. So now, okay, how do we, navigate? How can men navigate this situation? Because they're dealing with women, honestly, that are putting them second. And so now we have this, this 30-year-old time when they're trying to get married. So now you got women coming up into their 30s. They may have a child. They might have a lot of sexual partners. And then now they're still trying to get married to men that might have one partner, two partners, might have never had children. They have all of this money or whatever it is because they went to school and they were called a lame. But now, we're in this really different situation. And I know a lot of the men that follow me, they're in that situation. So how can these women, like I said, because, that's mainly what we're talking about today. We're dealing with these women that are getting up in age. So how do women navigate this? Does the woman, if you could just speak to it a little bit, because I know this is a kind of a complicated thing, but how do women that might have a child or might have a decent amount of sexual partners, how does she turn it around for herself? Now that, she is reaching 30, 31, 32, or whatever, how can she turn it around for herself and get the life that she wants and then try to help other women as well?
The first thing I think of is anything is possible. As a Christian, I completely believe that. So just because you have a child, just because you have been sexually active before or whatever, doesn't mean that there isn't someone out there that is right for you that God will put in your path. You have to throw away unrealistic expectations. At this point, you need to know what it is that you desire. You need to look at the past and the men that you have been interested in before and see where it didn't work out and what was the similarities, because there's a lot of similarities between the men that you continue to pick back then. But the father of your child and any other man that you were dating, there was something that's kind of plugging you to that person or pulling you to that person. Figure out what it is so you don't make that mistake the next time, so that you can get rid of that and you can figure out what that is so that you're not allowing that same thing to draw you again. Another thing, and the most important thing, is it's about your child. So unfortunately, again, the problem with the whole romantic love movement and all of that stuff is that it's about me, 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 me. How I feel, how he makes me feel, what he does for me. And like I said, if he stops doing that, then I have to move on from him. I have to stop being with him. I have to divorce him, separate my children and myself from him because he is not making me happy anymore. That's the biggest problem with that whole movement. It's about selfishness. But When you have a child and you want to do things different, you have to, and I hope you come to the realization it's not about you anymore. It's about the child. So you need to also find put yourself in a situation for a man to find you that desires children. Maybe he has some of his own, wants children, but also who is going to be best for your child? Who's going to give your child a decent life? Especially if the father of the child that you have is not in the life anymore. It's like, for example, like Sierra and Future. I know Future is around, but there was allegations on her part that he's not really around that much, and she wanted to basically terminate custody and just have Russell raise the child completely and not have him go over there for any more. That was like maybe a year or two ago. Have any more visits or whatever, because she felt like he just wasn't paying attention to the child. And as you see, Russell has become this model citizen and this model father who has literally taken this young boy as his own son. And then, of course, they have other children as well. So you got to understand that it's actually all the points I put good. Let's put a pin in those points. That's good. But the biggest thing is who's going to be good for your child, especially if your child is young. It's not about you, Mom. I'm sorry. I'm sorry that the world and your family and the culture lied to you and told you that it was about your happiness, your life, and what you want. Well, unfortunately, whatever, it's not. It's about the child and how you're going to raise this child to be a productive member of society. The best way to do that is in a two-parent married home. You didn't get it right that first time, and we all make mistakes. But now we have to move aside all the foolishness, the things that we would normally look for in a man. Oh, how he makes me feel. Oh, I'm so attracted to him. There's so much chemistry, all that stuff. Forget about that. Let's figure out the type of man that'll be a husband to you and this child, that will take this child under his wings and give him that life that he needs. That's what it's going to be about for you if you are a woman who has a child and you desire marriage. Now, I'm not sitting here and saying that he's going to be a horrible husband to you, that it's just only going to be focused on the child and he's not going to pay you any mind. There's not going to be any romance, anything. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying the things that you should be looking for at this age and at this time, it should not be what you were looking for when you were 20, 18, 15, 19, whatever. It should be you should have a whole nother standard. The scales should have fallen from your eyes and you're like, I'm not making those mistakes again. I'm not doing that. This is what I know I need. And also I know my child needs this. So that's the way to make it right, is to get your priorities in order, know that you want to be married, and know the type of man you're looking for, and specifically know that he's going to be good to that child. And I would say that's really what it is. Forget about the concept of romantic love and focus on God's version of love, which is sacrifice. If you see in a man that he is sacrificing, that he is generous, that he is kind, that he is, he is willing to protect you and put himself in harm's way for you and your child, that's someone that's interesting. For example, we're talking about Sierra. Sierra did an interview with the lady on a podcast, and she said that the way that she knew that Russell was the one, they had some type of situation where they were at someone's house. I don't know whose house it was. They were sitting down, but her son was like about to fall over, and I think Russell like caught him or like reached out to make sure he was okay or something like that. Okay, I'm paraphrasing. But she knew basically that he was the one for her, but how he treated her son. She knew that he's going to be a good husband and a good father, because look at what he's willing to do for my son. That's not even his, right? And so that's what I would say. When you have a child and you've already been there, done that, and you have a child, but you want to be married and you want that child to have a decent life, you need to find a man that wants to have a child and will raise that child and treat that child well like it's his own son. That's why you're going to want to get married. That's why you're going to want to get married. And that's what you're going to be looking for. Not all of this stuff about how does he make me feel. Also, if you are with a man that's going to treat your child right, he's going to treat you right too. Like, why would he just treat your child right and not you? So don't think that what I'm saying is just focus so much on the child that you're not going to get anything. You're going to get something in return, because you're going to have a child that's growing up in a stable home, and he's going to most likely be a decent human being. So you're getting something out of this, right? But also, I'm pretty sure if he's going to be good to the child, he'll be good to you. I've never heard of a situation. Maybe there's somewhere out there, because we know there's so many people and so many stories. But I'm sure it's rare where a man is only good to a child and is just awful to the mom or awful as a husband and stuff like that, but only just loves the child so much. I'm sure it happens, but I think if he cares about the child, he's going to care about the well-being of the mother too. Okay, so don't think I'm just saying that he just has to be. I'm just going to marry someone that's just going to be good to the child, but he does nothing for me. What I'm saying is that should not be your only me. That's done. You have a child. What's going to do for that child? What can he bring to the table for that child? And ultimately, your child growing up in a happy home is going to be beneficial for him, for the child, but also for you and your marriage.
I mean, you said a lot of really great points there, and like I said, you don't have to answer this one. We can skip it if you want. But one of the things that I talk a lot about is the fact that men come in as protectors, providers, and leaders, and most women can agree that that is something that they're looking for, right? So I do think it's a very powerful thing. But over on this channel, which is I know one of the differences between our channels, is that we talk a little bit more about a woman's sexual energy, about her sexual nature. And you kind of mentioned it in what you just said with the whole concept of how does he make me feel. It's the romanticized energy, right? So how does a woman really navigate that? Because, and this is what I mean. What if a woman finds a guy who is that protector, he is that provider, he is that leader, but she's just not happy sexually, you know, and for whatever reason, I don't know, you know, but how does she navigate that? Is she supposed to ignore it? Is she supposed to, they get some books? Because that's what I say. I just think they should get some books and talk it out. Sooner or later, if he, got problems, he can use Viagra, he can get it to work. So that's kind of what I would think. But, I don't know. I'm not in, everybody's head. But would it be, this is kind of like a complex, question. Would it be that big of a problem for a woman? I think it is because we're seeing a lot of cheating going on out here. But how does a woman navigate that? Because it's easy for us to say, hey, girl, go with the guy that's going to take care of you. But a lot of these women are saying, look, I sexually don't want him, and I can't deny that side of me for 50 years. So how does a woman navigate that?
You're not going to like my answer. They're not going to like my answer.
Hey, as long as you want to say it to the world, you're talking to the world.
I don't want to be rude, so respectfully, I will say this. I honestly don't care. I just don't care. I feel like yes, that's important to a relationship, but I am I am so into, again, there used to be a bracelet that used to say, "What would Jesus do?" That's the thing that we always would measure our life with, and it be a reminder in any situations we would be in. I do believe sex is important. God made sex. He made it for marriage specifically. He wants us to enjoy it. Song of Songs, Psalms or Solomon is all about things like that. That is important. But let me just say there's two things that come. When I mention Song of Solomon, one of the biggest verses is don't awaken love before it's time. Don't awaken love before it's time. One thing that I find is that a lot of women who have these issues when it talks about sex and stuff, I don't want to be with someone that's not going to satisfy me sexually and all this stuff. It's kind of like what we were talking about on my channel, and I don't know when I'll put the video out, but whenever I put it out, y'all come and look at my channel about this. But it's about, a lot of times it's because that woman has been exposed to sex with others, with another man and with someone else. Again, if you have nothing to compare it to, then what is all of these fantasies in your mind? What is all of this stuff that you are trying to tell? You're trying to say that my husband is not satisfying me. How do you know he's not satisfying you? What do you have to compare it to? Are you comparing it to all the other men you've been with sexually? Are you comparing it to whatever you saw in a romantic movie and a love scene, which we know these are actors? Are you comparing it to whatever corn that you saw? You know what I mean? But what is it that we're comparing this to? Because that's an issue. If you're sitting here saying that my child and my child's happiness and my child growing up with an intact family is not as important than my sexual desires being filled, then I once again think you have a wrong definition of marriage and love, and you probably shouldn't get married. Because What if your husband gets in an accident and is paralyzed from the waist down and you can no longer have sex with him? Does that give that does that are you going to leave now? Are you going to leave your marriage because the sex isn't what you want? Are you going to say, you know what, he doesn't make me happy, so I'm going to go cheat? We have to understand that we have to think about these thoughts and these ideas of what's really leading to. Why are we having these thoughts? And a lot of times for some women that feel like I can't have terrible sex. That's way more important to me than my child growing up in a two-parent married intact family. I think even when you say it like that, to me it sounds ridiculous. But I think it's because of, again, culture, what the world is telling them. Leave that man. If he's not going to satisfy you, leave him. If he's not going to do this, leave him. If he's not making you feel good or happy, leave him. We have culture telling women that. We have other women telling women that who have unstable, terrible marriages, okay? We have the Cardi B's of the world talking about, I don't cook, I don't clean. Let me show you how I got this ring. And now she's filing for divorce for the second or third time from her husband. So we have all of these. We need to understand where these sources are coming from. Because did God guarantee us a great sex life? Is that even something that God said we could? Sex is great and it's in marriage and all that stuff, but that's the part of marriage. It's a time and it's an opportunity for couples to learn about each other, what each other likes, what each other doesn't like. And I'm pretty sure if a man is a decent man, he's going to want to, help you have good sex. I don't see how a man who is decent, and I'm just saying decent, I don't see how he wouldn't care about that part of your marriage either. I'm sure he would want the same as well. So to me personally, my thoughts may be extreme and is very cultural, but I think sex is important and it's great. But I don't think breaking up your family home because you are not satisfied with your sex life is right. It's also not biblically grounds for divorce. There's nowhere in the Bible that says you can get a divorce because the sex isn't good. I just don't see that. I see that as culture trying to dictate what Christians or what marriage is supposed to be instead of what God says marriage is going to be. And marriage and love is patient. It is kind. It is not self-serving. It is self-sacrificing. And if we're not ready for those conversations and that type of love, then we should just throw marriage away and keep doing what we're doing now. And let's see how that's turned out for the Black community. Because we have way more single mothers. We have way more broken homes. We have mental illness running rampant. We have, way more people in prison. All of this stuff is because no two-parent married homes. So let's continue with the facade of I need to be completely satisfied and happy all the time in order for me to stay married, get married, or be in this marriage, regardless of what it could do to my family if I decide to leave because I'm not getting it. Well, the grass is not always greener on the other side. And that's all I want to say about that. I'm not trying to be mean. I'm just saying that I think it's time for us to grow up, be mature, and realize that we have a lifetime to work on our sex lives with our husbands or with our wives. It's a lifetime for that. We're together. We're bonded forever. I'm sure it's not going to be terrible forever. That's why you pray. That's why you communicate. That's why you try to get therapy, like you said, maybe read some books. That's why you get a man that, when you're vetting this man for marriage, you see how he's paying attention to you. You see how he's listening to what you're saying, that he actually cares about what you're saying. Because I'm guaranteeing you, if he was like that during the dating, he's most likely going to be like that during the marriage. And he's probably going to want to listen to you when you say, hey, how about we try this? Or I don't really like that. Or, this is a concern for me. I just think anything else is an excuse.
No, I love that. I love that. And honestly, I think, to your point, and I'll say this, I believe the same thing. I think most men will try to make it work. I truly believe that. And I do believe that most women will honestly try to make it work as well. And like I said, there's books and all this other kind of stuff. And then you vet the person. What do you like? What are you trying to do? What are you not trying to do? If they ain't going to do it for you while you're dating, they doggone sure not going to do it, for you, once you're in a relationship. So I 100% agree with it. But one of the things that, you've talked about, and I think this all kind of lines up, is, just the whole concept of common sense and discipline. See, to me, when I start to look at some of the women that walk away because of their sex life, it really still boils down to this whole common sense and discipline thing. Because a lot of us, we don't want to say it, but we're not disciplined. And I remember watching this little teeny tiny documentary, and they talked about how they would put in front of a child, they would put like two pieces of candy, two teeny tiny pieces of candy. And then they would tell them, you can have one piece now, or if you wait 5 minutes, you can have both of them. And so what happened was they did this experiment, and then they, found the kids like 15 years later. And they found that the kids that waited, which means they had discipline, they're pushing off gratification, they actually did better in life. And when me and you talk, a lot of the times we're also talking about being chased, how many sexual partners you're having, blah, blah, blah. And all of this lines up. The woman and or man that's had all this sex early on, they weren't really disciplined to hold on to their chastity. And it comes back to backfire. So when we, look at it from that perspective, that's another way, kind of seeing it, because there is a whole point of pushing off gratification. And if you could push off gratification, and people on this channel know, I'm always talking about 90 days. And like I always say, it's not exactly, it could be 60, it could be 120, but trying to do your best to push it off. And 9 times out of 10, the person's going to show their hand. They're going to show the person that they are. And so now, even if you were talking about having sex with them, now you're like, well, like I said, I don't encourage y'all to do that. But at least if they walk away, okay, that might have been a sexual partner that you missed, which now removes, possible soul ties and other problems with that person, right? But in the final, minutes that we have, because I know time is starting to tick, and it always ticks when I'm talking to you, because you have so many great ideas, right? I'm always about, solutions. I really believe in solutions. And a lot of times we talk about women's unrealistic expectations. And we're always saying, okay, from a guy's perspective, we're like, okay, wait, you want a 6'5", you want us to make $500,000 a year, we got to take care of you all the time, we got to do this, we got to be great lovers, we got to speak well, we got to be chocolate because y'all don't like caramel skinned brothers, and light skinned brothers ain't in right now, so, our beers got to be so thick, all this kind of stuff, right? So we're always talking about these unrealistic expectations. But again, to be a problem solver for these women that are out here, they're trying, okay, to see if they can salvage some of this youth and get married. What are some realistic expectations that they should have when it comes to dating out here?
Realistic expectations.
Realistic expectations to look for things they should say, okay, yeah, he needs to have this.
The bottom line is, do you share the same values? That's the biggest thing. Is the biggest thing. A lot of people love to point to the Bible where it says don't be unequally yoked with unbelievers and all that stuff. But there's a reason for that. I think that's the biggest thing. I think something you mentioned before on my channel is being decently attractive. I'm taking that. I'm letting you know, Jay, I'm taking that because I think it's so good. But I just think, am I somewhat attracted to this man? He doesn't have to be LL Cool J or Denzel Washington or Michael B. Jordan, but am I somewhat attracted to him? And do we have the same values? Because if you have the same values, another thing that you said before also on my channel was character. If you have the same values, basically you're both people of faith, of strong faith, you practice the disciplines of faith. This is you can just talk to each other in a conversation about God or something about God. It's going to come up in whatever it is that you're talking about. That is probably the most important because the shared values is going to translate into the values that your children are going to have. So you have shared values from the beginning. Pay attention to your conversation. If you are a woman that wants a man, and I'm assuming you do want a man that's a Christian, and an actual Christian, not just saying it, but really a Christian, have conversations. Talk to this man. Let's not do the fluff. Okay, and this is what you were saying on my channel. It's not good to always, we're talking about smooth talking and smooth, all that smooth talking and all that stuff. Sometimes that could be a manipulation tactic if it's a man that's just talking all that smooth mess because he's not going to let you get any deeper. There's not going to show you who he really is or what his character is or have deeper conversations. when you're talking and you're listening, you could be talking about music. You could be talking about the state of the world, politics. You could be talking about pop culture, what's going on in celebrity entertainment or whatever, what's going on at work, job, whatever. When you just get to know somebody and you allow them to talk, as you were saying, eventually they're going to show their hand. And one of the things is a person of faith that that their faith is going to come out in the conversation all the time. What they believe is going to come out in the conversation all the time. If you just allow people to talk and share and share and share, eventually that faith is going to come out. So you could be talking about music and they're going to turn it and talk about something about God or Jesus or whatever. It's going to come out. And so what I'm saying, that's one of the ways to know that you have shared values. We need to, another thing is, when it comes to dating, I am against doing way too much on dates in the beginning. I don't have a problem with going to a fancy dinner or a restaurant, but I think, to me personally, I think that should be done. And listen, I'm not a dating expert, so I'm not going to tell you what to do, but I think what you should do is difference between what to do. It's a suggestion. I think in the beginning, coffee dates are good, ice cream dates are good, all kind like simple stuff.
You know, men right now are like, what? What's she saying? Coffee dates okay? I know men right now are celebrating.
Simple, you know, Simone Biles, the first date that her and her husband went to was to get cookies.
Yeah, but see, I've always said that marriage-minded women, in my opinion, generally, like the ones that come out to my group, generally they don't have a problem with a museum date, a coffee date, a cookie date, you
A
know, and
park
all
date.
the because they're marriage-minded. But girlfriend energy women, you know, they want the man to spend on them. It's like spend money on me, spend money on me. Now I do encourage the men on this channel, you know, because like I said, I talk to both men and women, and I do encourage the men on this channel to be okay with, you know, taking the woman out to a restaurant. You know, like I say, it don't have to be expensive. It could be Cheesecake Factory, but you know, taking the woman out, you know, enjoying it, blah blah blah. But I always tell the man, you pick the restaurant and don't be so quick to just put in a lot of money. So I love the fact that you talked about that. So continue, go on,
Yeah.
because I know the men are loving that. They're
Well,
gonna be
one of the
all over on your channel now. You probably gonna get a
well,
million subscribers tomorrow. They're gonna love that.
well, it's well. Also, it's just because in the beginning, I'm really a strong proponent. Listen, we were talking about dating after 30 or at 30 and up. When you're at a certain age, you don't have time to be playing around. You played around when you were a teenager. You played around when you were in your 20s. I don't think you should play around in your 20s, honestly. But you did, and we move on, right? We made mistakes, and we're moving on. But the desire is to still get married. I think it's time out for foolishness. All, and I think one of the reasons why I see there's certain couples that, one of the things I notice is that older couples, when their kids are all out of the house and stuff like that, and they're I'm not talking about couples that are like together, but say you're single and your kids are out of the house, they're in college or they're living their lives. I've noticed that those people, they get married or they start dating quickly. Like they don't have as much of a laundry list of demands and things that young people have, right? Because they, I think at that point, they just want someone that they can be have companionship with, and that's just decent. So they're not looking for all the stuff that they were looking for when they're 20s, because one of the reasons is probably they found out that that stuff was nothing but fluff and it didn't work, having this whole laundry list of crazy expectations. So by the time they're in their 40s or 50s and 60s and they're, you know, widowed or they're outside of, you know, they're not married or whatever, there's no kids around, it's like really quick for them, in my view, for them to get with somebody. It's not even so much about looks or anything. It's just about, hey, we get along, we have fun together, and we have some common interests. And that's really it. All of the other stuff that we care so much about when we're young, it doesn't matter. So I think we could take some things from those older people who just seem to get with somebody so quickly and, after getting a certain age. But what I'm saying is we don't have time to play games. If you're marriage minded and your biological clock is ticking and you want to have children in wedlock, you want to do it that way, the right way, then you need to focus on going on dates and talking to this person. The best way to get to know someone is to talk to them, to allow them to talk, because they will expose whether it's a red flag. We say red flag, green flag these days, right? So whether it's a red flag, green flag, they will expose it by just allowing them to talk. If you start talking about something that they're really interested in, or they get into, like a rant or something, like kind of what I'm doing, because I'm really interested in this topic, eventually they're going to like just let it all out and say everything that's on their heart and mind or whatever. And you'll be able to judge somewhat of that person's character just by what they're saying. The Bible says, out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. So you're going to hear what they are saying. And that is the best way. Fancy dates, yacht dates, all of this stuff going all these places is a distraction in my view. It's a distraction because you're so focused on how fancy and nice the date is and how flashy and how this man is probably stacked, or he could take me here, he could take me there, or we're going on this type of date, or we're all of that stuff is a distraction. You're so focused on the date and you're so focused on all of that, you're not listening to anything he says. You're not hearing it because you're distracted. And so if you're going to be with a man just based off the fact that he paid for you to go to a nice date, or y'all went to a movie or whatever, listen, a movie date is good if there's like a rest, like maybe a dinner afterwards or a cafe or something like that so you guys can talk. I am just all for getting to know someone as soon as possible, as quick as possible. I don't think dating should take long. I don't think, getting married and all that stuff should take long. I think if you've talked enough and you've, talked and talked and talked and talked, you're going to know who that person is. Eventually, you're going to know who that person is because they're going to talk themselves into you knowing who they are. So I say coffee dates and ice cream dates and cookie dates and maybe just strolling through the park, because that strips everything down. It's the most vulnerable you can be, and it's not so much hoopla and fluff around it. You're walking through the park and you're literally going to have to ask questions. You're going to have to talk. You're going to have to talk about what's going on in the park and what you see and who you see and how is your life and how did you become, I don't know, whatever your occupation. Like, that is the time to talk. So yes, I'm for those simple dates because that is the time for everything to be stripped away and for you to completely learn who that man is, and he is able to learn who you are without spending so much money. Because also, I'm not for men or women wasting their time. I'm spending all this money on you and then it's not even working. Like, we're not even, there's nothing going on. I don't know that much about you, and also I just wasted all my money and you're not even interested in me anymore. So I just think keep it simple. And once you know that this is something for real, then, start going, you can do all that the fancy stuff. But strip it down because you don't have time. If you're marriage minded and you're older and you desire marriage and all of that stuff, strip it down, simple dates, let him talk, get to know him, make sure that you have the same values, in the conversation, he's going to talk about God. He's going to talk about Jesus. He's gonna say something like the Holy Spirit told me, or I was doing this, or and God gave me this idea. It's like God is going to be in his conversation. The people that say they're about God but they never talk about God, that's a red flag to me, because how is God not included in your daily life and you as a human being and you being and connecting with God as a Christian? Like, that is going to be a topic at some point. You're going to talk about it. So just pay attention to that. Do we have the same values? Because if you have the same values, he'll have the right character most likely that you desire. So values, character, and I think the last thing was like decently attracted. Make sure you're decently attracted and you have the mindset. He has that mindset to marry. And I'm pretty sure if he is a Christian for real, like, he's going to want to get married too and not waste his time. So pay attention to a man that's not wasting his time and is like, this is what I want. This is what do you want? Like, we're talking about this and he's being clear. So I would say that the most important though is shared values.
Awesome, awesome. I love that because, for me, a lot of what you said is dead on the money, what I believe as well. And I just think a lot of people, like I say, they waste time. They get caught up in this little crap going over here, this little crap going on over there, instead of, focusing in. And one of the things that I'm always telling women, especially, because they're always like, well, how do I know if he's Christian? How do I know if he's Christian? It's just like you said, he'll bring up God. And when you start to ask him what's his favorite gospel songs, he's not like, well, that song Kirk Franklin had about 5 years ago. Yeah. He's going to listen to gospel. He's going to listen to something, some kind of Christian song. It's going to be a part of who he is. If God is not a part of who he is every day, then trust me, God's not with him.
And you know what? Real quick, let's when we have the chance, let's talk about this another time. But let's talk about this Kirk Franklin situation. I am itching to talk about it.
Oh yeah,
Okay,
yeah. We
so
gotta talk about
we
Kirk.
definitely have to talk about that.
Yeah, so we definitely got to get into that. But anyway, for right now, we're just gonna go ahead and end this video. I thank everyone for hanging out. Remember guys, right now I am starting to move into membership. So if you want to go down there and hit that join button, you can go check it out because there's going to be a lot of little extras and different things like that over there. All right, so I won't go into it right now because I know this video is already long, but definitely go check that out. Also, please like, please subscribe, and I'm going to see you all in the very next video.